Hey folks, Richard here. I'm out in the back garden. It's been a week of a lot of troubles this week. 3 episodes of vertigo and what have you, but it's been also pretty hot in the late 80s, high 80s and 90s. But I wanted to continue a little bit on the previous thing I mentioned about when I talked about the overthrow of various countries by US capitalism or various regimes, starting with Guatemala, of course. And it's interesting because with the Guatemala episode back in 1953, there was some doubt whether they'd be able to accomplish. And if you go to the previous one about that, you talk about, and I point out the involvement of the CIA, the Catholic Church, and so forth, Cardinal Spellman. At one point, it didn't look like it was going to go well. They'd done some little bit of bombing here, a little bit of intervention there, bribery there, and this, that, and the other. And they weren't quite sure and how it was going. And I think it was Alan Dulles was talking to the president to report to Eisenhower about it. Eisenhower decided to go ahead with it. And he said, if you at any time take the route of violence or support of violence, then you commit yourself to carry it through, and it's too late to have second thoughts. And why I think of that statement, and of course they went on and they got rid of Arbenz, and I think a couple of 100,000 indigenous people died because of that one. But anyway, they just moved on to Iran. But anyway, then I thought about Trump and this war. This war is clearly a setback and a mistake. Anybody can see that. And it's a real crisis for Trump. But the thing is, they can't, the US imperialism cannot extract itself. They cannot retreat. And part of that is individuals, but predominantly the problem is the system. It would be a defeat for imperialism, the dominant imperial power. That's the problem here. And this is why capitalism can eliminate life as we know it at some point. They don't have nuclear weapons for fun. And also you've got a settler colonial regime like Israel's, similar to Nazi Germany. Who knows what Nazi Germany would have done if they had a nuclear bomb? They were about to send V2s over to London. I know my mum used to talk about that. Used to get those doodle bugs that would cut out, and then they didn't know where they were going to land. But so it's the system of capitalism, and imperialism is in its highest stage when it is a global system. Money is there's one border that is crossed by no matter what, and that's capital. They don't want any limits on capital. And so when you look at the big picture, and I went and just thought about the British system, of the cruelty and the horror of it all. But look at the transformation to capitalism in Britain. You know, you read that book by there's a number of them, but Polanyi's book, for example, called The Great Transformation, where he talks about in Britain as capitalism was developing, they enclosed the land, they drove the peasants off the land, which their sustenance, just like they did with Native Americans, and wherever they go, they were competing with Dutch for wool manufacturing, so they enclosed the land. And that caused what he described as catastrophic dislocation of the lives of common people. And of course then what happened, you had the workhouses. These people they were for hunting or fishing on what was their common land. They now could have their hands chopped off. They could get killed for vagrancy and be hung and drawn and quartered and so forth. The workhouses appeared and what have you. So that the catastrophic situation for the British peasantry at the time. The British working class were very, very small. The capitalism hadn't developed to that era, to that point, to absorb all that excess labour through the enclosure system. Then it travels abroad. See, capitalism has to, as Marx put it in the Communist Manifesto, read that short little pamphlet, a historical analysis, a historical materialist pamphlet. As he described back in 1848, him and Engels, the need of a constantly expanding market for its products chases the bourgeoisie over the whole surface of the globe. It must nestle everywhere, settle everywhere, establish connections everywhere. Think of American bases in every country. Think of the British prior. They didn't go into Africa because they didn't like dark-skinned people. The first they went into Ireland, they're white-skinned people. There was a Holocaust in Ireland. When you look at what they did there through their policies, not just direct killing. And so you see it in Israel and everything else. Well, you want to talk about Israel? Let's go to Native America. What happened to the Native Americans here and to the Africans that were brought as slaves over here, you know, they say that as many as 20 million may have died. That's phenomenal when you think of it. Not as phenomenal if you think of it. And the Native Americans today, you look at the statistics in the reservation down there in Arizona. I'm getting old, my memory. I know there's the Hopi and the others down there. It's a bit different to the Klamath, who have access to food and the water. It's like third world country. As we're billions, we're bombing people. We can't even provide electricity or water or basic necessities, this country. But it's capitalism that is the problem, the system of production that's the problem. And that's what we have to drum into our minds, because we have to figure out, how do we change the system? And the reason I got the Communist Manifesto was because I didn't read it till late in life, is because he was right about the history in general, and he's right about capitalism. He wrote mostly about capitalism, not about socialism. He wrote about capitalism, and I believe his general analysis of how the situation will change and what will develop was spot on. It was, given he's looking into the future and learning from the past. So you have to read that, and I'm going to try and add another second part to this. I don't want it to go longer. I'm not very good at skill. They keep telling me TikTok to go public, but I'm afraid to. I don't know. I can't correct a mistake. I don't know what's the point of doing it. But anyway, I'll end right there, and I'll do a little second one on that question about how change might take place and what we have to really look to as the vehicles for change, and the road that we will have to pass, we'll have to travel to do that, because there's a solution. All right, it's a beautiful day.